The regular can be seen on national TV talking about security or been met as a speaker at many renowned security conferences. His topics range from risk assessment and threat scenarios to social engineering and human factors. Today, Tim will speak about how to protect the protectors, musings about security in security. Tim, please.
All right, thank you very much. I think this is my third DeepSec or my fourth. I'm not quite sure right now, and I'm always thrilled to be on board. So thank you very much for having me this time as well. So my topic is how to protect the protectors. Now, what do I mean by that? First off, when I say how to protect the protectors, that's a bit of, well, I don't want to say misleading question, but I would rather like to go in a direction that takes us to, taking a view inside our own organizations. And there have been plenty of reports in the media in the last couple of months. And the last couple of months, and I would say the last 1 3/4 years, have been interesting for a number of reasons. So just as a primer here. A couple of words about myself. It has been mentioned in the introduction. My name is Tim Berghoff. My business cards, for some reason, say security evangelist. And I'm not one in a position to argue with that. I am originally from a field that has, well, very little overlap, if any, with security. I originally started out as an English and linguistics major, and somehow through a path that doesn't exactly look as the crow flies, I have landed in IT and IT security. I've been working for GData for a number of years now. I've started in 2009. Started out in working in customer support, first for home users, then for business users. I had a brief stint in consulting, and for a couple of years, I've now been working in our corporate communications team. And as was hinted at already, I'm usually found in front of or behind some sort of camera, as this picture shows. Now, without further ado, the usual disclaimers do apply here. So with that out of the way, we'll get right into the nitty-gritty. Well, I would say the security industry or the software industry as a whole might have a bit of a problem. The last couple of months have seen a number of reports on scenarios where service providers have become the targets of threat actors. I'm sure you're all familiar with the names and the organizations involved here. And this is a problem that isn't going to go away anytime soon. On the contrary, I think we are going to see a bunch more of those problems in the months and years to come. And to add to that, a number of organizations have been compromised that have quite an extensive collection of interesting tools that have also been exfiltrated and that found their way into the hands of threat actors who are preparing to use those if they aren't doing so already, because the nature of said tools is to be, a bit on the sneaky side and rather difficult to detect. Now, when I say the security industry or the software industry might have a problem, I should get one thing out of the way right off the bat. I'm talking about any tools and any products that are, I would say, security adjacent, so that have some overlap with security and or have a direct influence on security. This might include things like network management, that might also include security products, as a whole. Now, with that being said, I would like to say I'm not trying to attack any organizations, because frankly, this approach isn't getting us anywhere. even though what I'm about to tell or what I'm about to talk about is probably for some a bit controversial. Some might say, well, this is just a bunch of rubbish, which is a valid point. But I would like to open up a dialogue about this topic. I'm not here to provide solutions. I'm not here to talk about, well, this is how we should be doing things and this is how everybody should be doing business. It would be nice, but reality has shown that this is a topic that can be argued about. I'm here to just, try to get a dialogue started on this very topic. Now, as I said, some tools that are security adjacent might become, and in some cases already have become, a vector that is used by threat actors to leverage access to certain resources that they might not necessarily be privy to. And as soon as this topic has been starting to see coverage in the media, a lot of people understandably have asked, how can this be? I mean, those guys are, actually supposed to know what they're doing. They're supposed to be good at this, right? And this is where I would like to open the dialogue and say, well, we are good at this. However, there is something we need to talk about. First of all, is this an issue that we can fix? Or to expand on that, is this an issue that even needs fixing? Is there an issue at all? Maybe I'm completely overthinking this. This is also a possibility. Now, in the situation that we find ourselves in, whenever coverage is hitting the media about some organization having fallen short of some security measure, whether it's a service provider or an actual organization that has been targeted directly, we need to take into account a number of factors when asking the question, how can this be? How could this even have happened in the first place? And it probably comes to the surprise of nobody that there are a bunch of different stakeholders that each and every one of us has to be answerable to. Obviously, there is our customers who have certain needs and certain requirements. No surprise there. And it might be a good idea to listen to our customers every once in a while, because at the end of the day, they are the people who write our paychecks. Then obviously there is sales, who would like to, hence the name, sell more products. And last but not least, there are at some point or another investors involved who would like to see, something in return for their investment. And this whole concept of, well, things should be designed to be secure from the get-go, this is also not a surprise to anyone. This is not a new idea. This is not revolutionary by any means. This is an ideal that we all, to some degree or other, are aspiring to match up with. But then there is also this, age-old, well, I would say rivalry between technical people and salespeople, and to some degree also PR people, which has led a number of people to ask the question: are we actually selling what we make, or are we even making what we sell? Because what is communicated by a salesperson might not be the thing that a developer who is working on a certain product might have in mind. Just a thought there. But I don't want to, basically stoke this old rivalry, although I know it's by now somewhat of a trope, which is always fun to play with. I agree. I would like to take a look at a number of factors that are, none of those factors are really the sole reason for things maybe not going into an ideal direction from a security standpoint. But there are factors that are contributing to that. And the mixture of all of those is going to result in some, interesting challenges. For one, we have, to a certain degree, a sort of language barrier between different interest groups. And I don't mean that in the sense of, German and English and French and Russian or something. I mean in the terms of what people mean when they are talking about a certain subject. Now, this might be a case where a product is being built that is the result of a salesperson talking to an engineer, which has in the past led to products that are, from a purely technical standpoint, functional. They do what they are supposed to do within a very narrow margin of definitions. And the way in which those products oftentimes function is, well, they do work, but they are not necessarily practical, which in practice, again, means that people are going to be inventive when it comes to making use of a certain product. Then there is possibly the issue of overconfidence into a certain process, a certain product, or a certain thing that is used in organizations. And just, a little, I would say, pet peeve of mine is this whole awards industry. These days, awards are being given for, all manner of things, and salespeople and also PR people love awards because you can drum up, a bit of celebration and say, well, look at us, we have done this amazing thing, and give ourselves a pat on the back, which feels great, right? The problem is oftentimes that can produce this exact overconfidence. And there's been quite an interesting talk a number of years ago at the Virus Bulletin conference about how broken the whole awards industry is in certain respects. Highly recommend that. If you can find a recording of that talk, I highly suggest you look that up and watch it. And then we have the topic which I personally am not terribly fond of diving into, which is, certain personalities that we find inside our organizations, basically the world over. And there is a number of factors that might make life a bit, interesting. Right. There is a number of, let's say, uncomfortable truths that we have to face when it comes to building products that have some overlap with security. For one, in some cases, we are forced for a number of reasons to do things in software that we are not necessarily comfortable with. You can compare it to, say, a car mechanic fixing, an engine, where the customer states, well, the engine makes some sort of noise, and I suspect it's component such and such, and I would like you to replace that. And the mechanic then goes, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll take a look at it. And then they say, okay, I found this problem, which is causing, some sort of noise. I can fix that, no problem. But I found 3 or 4 other problems which are going to become a real issue for the engine in the months or years to come. And I would very much like to fix those while I'm working on it. Problem is, the customer might not want to do this, at least not right now, which for some issues is fine, but other things might be better fixable right now while you have, the engine out of the car anyway. You might as well do that. But at the end of the day, the customer decides and they say, no, I just wanted to fix that one issue and don't look at the rest. And well, at the end of the day, what the customer says goes, even though we might be perfectly aware that, okay, I'm going to see you in maybe 2 or 3 months when the next issue has been creeping up on you and make the whole engine into an unfixable mess. But this is what we have to contend with sometimes, and that we can voice in terms of, well, you really might want to check on this, but at the end of the day, that decision is not always in our hands. And sometimes we might not make ourselves clear enough. I think Frank has touched on this in his talk when it comes to product development and communicating potential issues that might have unexpected knock-on effects in the future. And also, this is somewhat really uncomfortable, especially for someone who works in the security industry. And I'm sure many of you work for awesome companies who do a lot of things right. I don't have any doubt in my mind about that. But there might be cases somewhere where a vendor does not necessarily practice what they preach. And I'm not talking about anything that like a developer is doing wrong. I really don't think so. But well, I think this is a possibility that we should be looking into, especially if a threat actor manages to compromise an organization that produces something that has a direct influence on security. And last but not least, I touched on this already, there are certain personalities which sometimes make life just that little more difficult. And I know in an ideal world, we all communicate with each other and we all get along with each other phenomenally within our teams. No doubt about that. I know it's the case in my particular environment. I get along with my team fabulously, no issues with that. And I'm sure the same is true for many of you, or maybe even all of you. But individual teams usually do not exist within some sort of vacuum. There has to be at some point interaction with other teams and other stakeholders. And this is where things might become interesting. There you have potentially people who are, well, let's say, very competitive and like to, push their own agenda. And don't get me wrong, competitiveness is not bad as such, not at all, because after all, this is what might, get a problem solved in a better and sometimes in a quicker way. But we all have, I'm sure, heard of, that one person who is really difficult to work with and who makes a work environment to some degree really toxic. Now, ask yourselves, do I know such a person? And if your answer is yes, I'm sure you'll have at least one, if not all of the traits in that one person. First of all, they are very dogmatic. They know how things should be done, and they do not allow any criticism when it comes to their own philosophy, their own way of doing things. And that philosophy and that way of working is oftentimes defended with an unprecedented zeal, which is not really shying away from basically throwing people under the bus just to prove a point. Now, we all know people like this. And a lot of those people are also really competitive. And people who exhibit one or more of those traits are very likely to, brush aside even valid concerns and valid points that go against what they have tried to dictate. And this is somewhat in line with Frank's talk from earlier. There has to be some way, and there has to be a way of communicating and adding proof to any claims and any concerns that you might have when developing some sort of product or some sort of service. If all concerns are just brushed aside and say, well, yeah, this is an edge case, this is never going to happen, try and back that up. It is going to be an uphill battle. I have no doubt about that. But there are, on the whole, a couple of things that we might try and do down the line. First of all, it's to look at, how product development and how development processes work. Now, internally in your teams, you probably all have it nailed down. When it comes to product management, though, product management is often the party that says, well, we need this feature by that time because that is going to, promote our overall company goal or our strategy. And I get this is a good point, and oftentimes it's worthwhile doing. However, unforeseen things do happen. And even if someone says at the last minute, guys, I found something that might be a little bit of a showstopper, then things get really, really exciting, and for all the wrong reasons. And that can lead to products that might fall short in some way when it comes to security. Then we might also take a very long and very hard look at certain indicators that are often used for, making some sort of assessment how a product is doing and how product development is doing. And one of the factors that everybody loves to hate is time to market. So that might be worth looking at, saying, okay, we can theoretically build that, but only under the condition that nothing else goes wrong. And oftentimes that's when Murphy says, hold my beer. Also, what we could do is have more collaboration, both internally and externally. Internally, I mean that not within your teams, but among different teams within an organization, within different departments, where people sit together and actively discuss and really be open about things that might not be going according to plan. And those voices must be heard. This also probably comes as a surprise to nobody in here. Also, there is one thing that I haven't added to this slide, and this was intentional, especially if you have any things that land in the media that have huge effects on certain organizations and certain end customers. There is often a shout for more rules, more regulations, more laws, etc. And I intentionally haven't added to that because I really don't think this is always going to be helpful. Although it's a very German thing to do, to always shout for more laws and more regulations. But the problem here is when you try and actually develop a product and have a bunch of legal stuff to deal with, a lot of laws are going to cause more confusion than they actually solve things, especially when it's new laws and new regulations. In Germany, we have a bit of a situation on our hands at the moment, which has led to a lot of confusion. I'm sure Manuel Artuk will have talked about that the other day as well. But suffice it to say, laws and regulations, especially new ones, might not always be helpful. What I would suggest here, which I'm really grateful for Frank also dealing with this topic in depth, is we need a little bit more maturity overall when it comes to our internal processes, our external processes, and the way we deal with any sorts of issues that might arise during a product development process and also during the maintenance phase. And this requires a type of people that is, as I was mentioning earlier, open to new ideas and also open to criticism. And criticism, I'm sure many of you will have experienced this to some degree. Criticism always is or should be non-personal. And even if it is voiced in a non-personal way, a lot of people do take it personally. And needless to say, this isn't going to help anyone. And I would like to close out this short presentation and open up a dialogue here with what I called a little lesson from space. And that lesson is called always aim to be a zero. And this goes back to the biography of Chris Hadfield, famous Canadian astronomer. Some might have heard of him, singing some David Bowie songs on the ISS. And this phrase, always aim to be a zero, somehow stuck with me. And the reason is aiming to be a zero, first of all, means to watch and listen and only do things when they are really worth doing. This being a zero goes back to a classification that Hadfield described in his book. There are three categories: -1, +1, and 0. Now, the -1 characters are actively trying to get involved, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but they get involved in a way that pushes other people aside and basically leads to personal friction, and worst of all, professional friction. Things are getting delayed because of several holdbacks, and they try to do everything themselves and try to dictate what should be done and how things should be done. This is the type of personality that is always going to cause some sort of problem, either now or in the very near future. Then there is the category called +1, which are those people who actively advance a project and really are helpful in bringing new results, improving results, and those are the people that everyone likes to be around. And then there is the third category, which Hadfield called 0, and that goes back to an experience he also described in his book when he first arrived in space. The first couple of days were pretty much awful because he always was preoccupied with not getting in the way and not damaging things. And the objective here is to first always aim to be a 0, because you're not getting in the way, you're doing the tasks that you're assigned. And then if you can contribute something or suggest something that will have a positive impact on the project, including lifting other people up, that is going to turn those zeros into category 1 automatically. And the nice thing is, those in category +1 usually think of themselves as category 0. And I think to some degree, we should have more zeros in our industry. And with that, I would like to close my little presentation, which is, again, supposed to be a primer on this discussion. I would like to hear your opinions on the topic. Again, if you say this is all, a load of rubbish and this really doesn't make sense, tell me so. And if you have any suggestions that I might not even have had on my map, please tell me so. And also try and engage into dialogues in your organizations and with other organizations as well. And with that, thank you very much for listening to my talk. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day. It's nearly weekend, so all the more, it's highly appreciated you being here. And with that, I'm handing it over again. Thank you very much. Handing it over again. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry about the problem. Some technical issues. Thank you, Tim, for your speak. Are there any questions in the room? Okay, I have one for you, Tim.
Yes, please.
In my opinion, the problem starts much earlier. It starts with the education at universities. Yeah? In our universities, we teach our informatics students how to develop software. Most of the time, we just focus on concepts and syntax. In good classes, we even teach them to write more performant code, but rarely we teach them secure coding. And I think, in my opinion, that's the first issue. We have to rethink how we teach our students to develop software. That's the first problem. And the second problem, I think security is still a bolt-on problem for most of the development processes in software. So most of the time, they first develop the software, whatever it is, and then they start thinking about, okay, we should test it for security issues, but we have a little time because we have a market launch already planned with the marketing and so on, and so we just have very little time for security testing. And this is, in my opinion, these are the two very big issues why we have still so many problems with security at the moment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I absolutely do agree. I would even go a step further and say this doesn't, of course, university or college, wherever you're located, that is definitely a factor, but it starts, in my opinion, even earlier in school, where, people are, in some countries, some countries might be better off than others. In Germany, the situation is pretty much, I don't want to call it hopeless, but it's going to be a challenge to get people involved into IT at all. And that obviously has knock-on effects on the education of our future security specialists. And meanwhile, the rest of us, the senior security specialists are getting older. At some point, they're going to retire. And they'll take all their knowledge with them, and who's supposed to teach them, good coding practices. This is, I think, definitely a valid point that should definitely be added to this list as well.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Then, Tim, it was a great talk. As often, I totally agree with your opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a great rest of the conference and have a great weekend.
Thank you.